important topic. Mental illness is huge, and she's going to tell you a little bit how the doctor, a mental health doctor, really reframes mental illness. And it's a really great approach as to how he looks at it. But then he's a really good health professional in the fact that he doesn't just look at symptoms and say, all right, this person's depressed, let's give them a pill. There's so much more to it than that. And he does a really good job at looking at it from all different angles. So with that being said, I do want to remind everybody this is part of our offering through the Transformed Lifestyle Medicine Alliance. As you guys know, we have done a lot of a variety of things from webinars to in-person challenges, online challenges. And our mission is to really serve our communities and share the good news of health improvement and the good news of health behavior change. And we really want to inspire people, especially in this day and age of doom and gloom and fear tactics. We want to let everybody know that there's hope. We all can be better. We deserve to be better, and we can absolutely take some practical steps to do that. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Isabella. She's going to be our presenter for this evening. She is one of our great interns for the Transform Lifestyle Medicine Alliance. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to her. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to stop us. We're going to try to have a 45 to 60-minute presentation, and then we'll save some time at the end for Q&A as well. All right, so on that note, Isabella, over to you.
Awesome, thank you. So yes, this book, as he said, is kind of all about reframing mental illness, and it's pretty cool because the author of this book, he has a lot of experience in looking at people's brains and kind of figuring out psychiatric illnesses and how we can help people. And so it kind of reframes the discussion, looking at mental health more as brain health. And I will introduce the author here, Dr. Daniel G. Aymond. He is a neuroscientist and a double board certified psychiatrist, and he believes that brain health is central to all health and success. So he wrote this book in just this year. He published it earlier this year in March, so it's very recent. I think he published it March 3rd, so it's only been out for about half a year. All right, so this book that he wrote strives to eliminate the stigma of the term mental illness and kind of replace it with this term brain health or mental health issues instead. And it strives to replace this outdated approach to helping mental health patients with a brain-centered approach that uses neuroimaging in addition to looking at symptoms, along with an individualized medical approach that varies person by person. This can include things like preventing and treating the 11 major risk factors called the bright minds factors, which we will look at all of them individually and how they can be prevented or treated. So reimagining mental health as brain health, he believes is important because people might begin to see their problems as medical instead of moral, which will in turn decrease stigma and shame, and can also increase compassion from families and those around them, and could increase compliance with treatments as well. So again, kind of reframing it so that it is more of a medical problem instead of a moral one. And I think that it will make more sense as we go along. But first, a brief history of mental illness diagnoses and treatments throughout history. I thought this was really interesting to see how they used to treat people throughout the decades. But this is Jarrett. He was diagnosed with ADHD when he was in preschool, and it was so severe that his teachers told his parents he would never succeed in school. Even parents of other children in his class wouldn't let Jarrett hang out with their kids because of his ADHD and his trouble being calm and focusing. And he went to 5 different doctors and was prescribed 5 different stimulant medications, all of which failed to help him and instead made him worse and triggered horrible rages. So this is how Jarrett would have been treated throughout history, from ancient civilization to now. Religious leaders, they might have resorted to some radical treatments, such as drilling a hole in his brain or attempting an exorcism. Philosophies like Hippocrates might have had him focus on something that fit his restlessness, along with some lifestyle factors, such as exercising and listening to music. That is an ancient civilization, so a long time ago. In the Middle Ages, they might have, again, attempted an exorcism or possibly placed him in an insane asylum. And in the 18th and 19th centuries, Jarrett might have been institutionalized, and even his family might have been placed under suspicion for Jarrett's behavior. In the early 20th century, they used to treat people actually with malaria parasites, which I thought was very interesting, beginning in 1917, to treat psychotic patients. So they might have tried that with Jarrett, or they could have performed a frontal lobotomy, which probably would have calmed his aggression, but it also would have permanently damaged his personality. In the late 20th century, this is where Jarrett saw 5 different doctors and was prescribed 5 different medications, and they all failed. But had he continued going to doctors, they likely would have continued this trial and error, but probably would have kept failing. And in the 21st century, so currently, Jarrett may have tried transcranial magnetic stimulation, possibly marijuana or ketamine. And Dr. Aymond, I don't think I have this, Dr. Daniel Aymond, the author of this book, he saw Jarrett and he gave him a brain scan and saw that there was activity in his brain that stimulants actually made worse. So had the doctors looked at his brain and seen the underlying biological activity that was that you can only see with this scan, they would have known that the stimulants they prescribed him would have made him worse, because that is what they were able to find out through the scan. So Dr. Aymond prescribed Jarrett some natural supplements, and he was better within months with the therapies that he was given by Dr. Aymond, who had known what to do because he looked at the brain scan. It's pretty interesting. So here you can see that if this shows kind of the disparity between treatment for mental health issues versus other physical health issues, such as chest pain and stomach pain and back pain. And you can see how doctors will look at physical scans of your chest when you have chest pain, but they won't look at your brain when you are experiencing mental health issues or symptoms, even though, according to Aymond, it's evident that the solution to a lot of mental health issues lies in these brain scans, like in Jarrett's case study. This is one other case study. This is an example of what Aymond means. So this is Jason. He started to hallucinate and hear voices when he was 18 and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And his psychiatrist told him and his parents that he would have to be on antipsychotic medications for the rest of his life. Aymond scanned Jason's brain and found that he had a previous brain injury, which was causing the hallucinations. And he was found to have psychotic depression, not schizophrenia, so he was misdiagnosed. And with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, healing nutrients, and cognitive behavioral therapy, he improved significantly. And 4 months later, he was much better. He did not have to be on these antipsychotics that he was supposed to be on for the rest of his life, according to his university psychiatrist. But looking at the brain scan really helped, and Dr. Aymond was able to find the solution for him. So making invisible illnesses visible. So experienced doctors, they can tell if someone appears to have a mental health issue based off of their symptoms. But what they can't do without brain imaging is to know the physical biology of the brain that could very well be a huge component to determining the cause and the right condition and the right treatment for the condition. Without looking at the brain, your physician or doctor can't, or psychiatrist can't determine the underlying cause of your symptoms a lot of times. So why don't all psychiatrists use brain imaging then? It's because for decades, they have been teaching this generalized symptom cluster model to diagnose and treat patients instead of this newfound, more objective and medical approach. So this is undermining the way they've been taught in psychiatric residency and in medical schools for decades. Right. Dr. Aymond made these 12 guiding principles to change your life, which are really cool. They serve as, it's just a lot of information about the brain and the importance of what your brain does, why it's important to take care of your brain. So your brain is involved in everything you do. When it works right, you work right. Usually when your brain is troubled, you will experience some trouble in your life. And your brain is the most complicated organ in the universe. So even though it's only accounts for about 2% of your body weight, I believe it weighs about 2 to 3 pounds on average. It uses 20 to 30% of the calories you consume and 20% of your body's oxygen and blood flow. It has needs that must be met in order to work at optimal efficiency, and it's soft and housed in a very hard skull, which actually it's so soft it has the consistency of like a custard or a soft butter, and it's easily damaged. Many things can hurt and help the brain. All parts of your brain need to be working well together to make you the best that you can be. And similarly, understanding your brain helps you identify specific problems and which part of your brain may need help, because problems in certain brain systems tend to be associated with specific issues. 10, psychiatric illnesses are not simple or single disorders. They all have multiple types that require their own specific treatments. So taking kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to treatment involves failure and frustration, because an individualized approach is usually more successful and involves a lot less frustration. 11, the amount of brain reserve you have can help you to handle life stresses or make you more vulnerable to them. So brain reserve is like that extra cushion of brain function you have, and this helps you deal with the stressors life throws at you. And to boost this brain reserve that you have to love your brain, avoid all that hurts your brain, or the best you can, and do the things that help your brain, which we'll talk about more later too. And lastly, the most important lesson from imaging that we can learn is that you are not stuck with the brain that you have. You can make it better, and we can prove it. So with a better brain, hopefully a better life and better mental health will come. The Bright Mind program that Dr. Daniel Aymond came up with includes these 3 components. So number 1 is optimizing the 4 circles of a whole life: biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. And 2, prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors that damage the brain and steal your mind, which that is the Bright Mind acronym. Each of the letters stands for a different risk factor that we'll look at. And 3, targeting treatment to your specific needs. So again, that individualized approach, not a one-size-fits-all model. These are the 4 circles. Here we go. Biological is the first one. This refers to avoiding anything that physically hurts your brain health and practicing good healthy habits, which is important not only for your physical health, but for your mental health too. Psychological circle, this encourages you to develop good self-care techniques to build self-confidence, such as telling yourself you are enough, practicing gratitude journaling, all that good stuff. Also, along with that, this is a big one in today's society where there's a huge social media presence, but avoiding excessive social media use, which can be psychologically toxic and possibly damaging to one's self-esteem. But engaging regular healthy psychological habits like these ones listed is what he definitely is stressing that. Social circle. This involves avoiding negative relationships and avoiding unnecessary stressors, building healthy, positive relationships and straying from negative ones, and managing stress well also. And lastly, the last of the 4 circles is a spiritual circle, which involves caring about your deepest sense of meaning and purpose, building and or rediscovering spiritual connections, and also engaging in meaningful work as well as meaningful relationships with people who share your values and faith. So that was the first component, and this one is the bulk of his approach. So these are the 11 major risk factors, and which he so conveniently made into the acronym Bright Minds, which is very fitting for the topic. I don't know how he managed to work it that perfectly, but as you can see, each of the letters in Bright Minds stands for a different factor, and we will go through these.
Isabella, if I can interject for one.
Sorry, yeah.
If you can go back to the slide, I just want to call out for everybody.
Sure. Which slide?
The Bright Mind slide.
Okay, yeah.
So when we're taking a look at the Bright Mind slide, what's really important, everybody, is that when we're looking at this acronym, it's a good way of reminding all of these. But what's really great is that what's good for the brain is good for the heart. What's good for the heart is good for all the other organs. What's good for all the other organs is good for everything else. So what's really important to understand here is that there's not one approach to help good mental health. There's not one approach for preventing diabetes or preventing cancer. It's all the same approach. And just really want to call that out. So when you're looking at truly transforming your health, like we talked about a little bit in the intro, understanding that all these things are interrelated. And when we address these areas, they improve all areas of our life. So just want to call that out for everybody. I'm sure you guys already know that, but just something to call out there that when we're looking at that all of this helps in a wide variety of ways. Thanks, Isabella.
No problem. So starting out, the acronym is B, which stands for blood flow. And blood flow is critical for life. It transports nutrients everywhere in your body, including your brain, of course. And as I mentioned earlier, your brain, although it only weighs a few pounds, uses about 1/5 of the oxygen and blood flow in your body. So it's a very important organ. It has so many functions, carries out so many functions. So it uses about 20% to 30% of your oxygen and blood flow. It is important. Blood flow is important not only for your physical well-being, but also your mental well-being. So low blood flow, shown on a SPECT scan, which is a type of functional imaging scan. It shows the blood flow of not just the structure of your brain, but the blood flow of your brain too. Low blood flow has been seen with depression, suicide, bipolar disorder, and more. But some of the risk factors, a lot of these risk factors through all the letters, a lot of them are lifestyle ones that we can control. And obviously here at Transform, we promote developing good lifestyle habits. So a couple of the ones here, not over-consuming caffeine. More than 2 cups of caffeinated drinks a day is a risk factor. High LDL, like low density lipoprotein, which is the quote bad cholesterol in the blood. Hypertension, so high blood pressure, sedentary lifestyle, smoking, nicotine use, excessive alcohol use, all these are risk factors. And strategies to help support your blood flow and blood pressure. You can avoid things that decrease the blood flow. So it's these that were mentioned on the previous slide. Hydrating, eating mostly plants, limiting salt intake, eating foods high in magnesium, getting enough sleep, engaging regularly in behaviors that enhance blood flow, such as spending a little bit of time out of your day in prayer or meditation, or building regular exercise into your lifestyle. Supplements, if you need them, but of course, trying to develop healthy lifestyle habits is the first approach we recommend.
One thing, Isabel, if you can go back to the previous. One thing to call out for everybody is as you're looking through the slides, I know me and Isabella have gone through this material, and can you go back one, Isabella?
Yes, of course.
When we're looking at all the strategies, what's really important for you guys is, again, like she mentioned earlier, it's a personalized approach. So as each of you are listening, my recommendation would be just to consider what you think are one or two things in each area that you can start to address. Knowing first and foremost, you want to look at the lifestyle behaviors first. So whether we're looking at struggling with anxiety or depression or just overall cognitive challenges, whatever it might be, we want to say to ourselves, what are some simple things that I can start doing? Although they might be simple, they also may be challenging. So just a recommendation as we're going through, the acronym here of Bright Minds, as she's going through each, it's going to be very repetitive in that you might see some overlap, but for you, I would just recommend writing down in your notes one or two things for each area you can do to improve. Thanks, Isabel.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that as well. And yes, it will be repetitive, but also, I don't know. Oh, you mentioned this at the beginning, but if you didn't hear, we'll have these posted so that you can go back and look at these strategies and risk factors, because there are so many on these slides. I won't read them all, but you can always go back and look at them afterwards. But yes, there will be repetition in some of these, but he put it perfectly. So, okay. Stands for retirement and aging. When you get older, your brain activity tends to start to decline, but this does not have to happen. So some of these risk factors, increasing age, obviously we can't control that, but having a job that does not require new learning, retiring without new learning endeavors are things that we can control. Loneliness, social isolation, too much or too little iron. Strategies for reducing your retirement/aging risk factors could be exercising your brain with new learning, puzzles, reading, stuff like that. Balancing your iron levels, staying connected socially with others, and just knowing your why for being healthy, which also goes for all of these. Oh, and also the first bullet, it usually, I think, on every single risk factor, the first bullet is to just care. So just to understand the importance and to take it seriously. You'll see that bullet is pretty much at the top of every strategies list. So next is I for inflammation. Inflammation is our body's reaction to, it's our body's natural way of coping with foreign invaders and injuries. And inflammation can damage our brain and contribute to neurological issues and ailments. Injury, infection are the common triggers of inflammation that a lot of people think of immediately, but there are also many other triggers of inflammation as well. So some risk factors: smoking, excessive alcohol again, chronic stress, obesity, prediabetes or diabetes, gum disease is one, excessive exercise, low levels of vitamin D, things like that. Some strategies for reducing your risk of inflammation: avoiding things on this slide that cause inflammation. So avoiding consuming too much alcohol, managing your stress in a healthy way, restraining from smoking, and also engaging regularly in habits that lower them, consuming prebiotics, possibly taking prebiotic supplements if you need, being cautious about taking some antibiotics that have side effects, that inflammatory side effects, and taking care of your gums too. So brushing your teeth, flossing, things like that. G stands for genetics, which, as we all know, we cannot change or control our genetics, but the good news is that having a genetic risk is not a death sentence. And while you can't control your genetics, you can control your behavior and sometimes your environment as well. So having family members with psychiatric issues does make you more vulnerable generally, because you have the genes, so you have the genetic vulnerability, but also because you are more likely to experience stress or possibly chronic stress because of seeing these challenges in your family before you. Other genetic risks for brain health issues could be not being serious about your health despite your family history, or epigenetic factors such as poor diet, environmental toxins, unresolved emotional trauma, and of course, your family history too. Some strategies for reducing your genetic risk factors could be avoiding any risk factors that accelerate disease for your genetics and engaging in regular healthy habits, again, to decrease your likelihood of, oh, and I forgot to read this quote that I like. Genes load the gun, but your environment and your behavior pull the trigger. So again, you can change your genetics, but it does not determine everything. You have control over your behavior. H is for head trauma. So this one, as I mentioned before, your brain is very soft. It is easily damaged, and physical trauma such as whiplash, jarring motions, that is like shaken baby syndrome, and blows to the head can cause things like bruising, broken blood vessels, damage to nerve cell connections, and a lot of research shows that head injuries could definitely increase the risk of many brain health issues. Some of the risk factors, this may be obvious, but one or more head injuries, contact sports, and some strategies: protecting your head, wearing a helmet, avoiding contact sports, wearing your seatbelt in the car, avoiding climbing ladders and trees, actively engaging in repairing past head injuries, maybe consider getting a functional imaging scan or study if you suspect that you might have experienced head trauma of some sort. So T is for toxins. This is a big one. Toxins, your brain is extremely susceptible to damage from toxins. They are bad for your physical health as a whole and pose a huge threat to your brain health as well. And they can reduce blood flow, as we were talking about earlier. Blood flow is one of the other bright minds factors and can also disrupt the endocrine system, impair the immune system, damage DNA, lots of other horrible things. And these are some common toxins at the roots of mental illness: alcohol, marijuana, mold, lead, smoking, some personal care products also. This is a long list of common toxins that can be inhaled and some that can be ingested or absorbed through the skin. So things like air pollution can be inhaled, aviation fumes, carbon monoxide, cigarette smoke. And some strategies for reducing your toxins risk factors. So avoiding toxins as much as possible. So quitting smoking, addressing drug or alcohol abuse, avoiding aluminum cookware and buying and storing foods in glass jars when possible, reducing toxin contaminated foods in your diet, purifying your air, strengthening your detoxification system. So an easy way to do this is eating fiber-rich foods, limiting or eliminating completely alcohol, drinking lots of clean water every day.
Isabella, if I can jump in on that one for a minute. If you can go
Yes,
back.
of course.
Something to call out for everybody. Well, two things that really want to call out. Can you go back a slide, Isabella?
Yes, sorry.
When you're looking at the toxins in our food, it's really important to understand that the great majority of processed foods have a lot of additives and toxins, as well as, unfortunately, a lot of the meat and dairy products through the way they raise these animals. It unfortunately ends up having a lot of toxins in it. So it's something to be mindful of, is that people might think, well, I don't drink or smoke. However, keep in mind that the foods we eat do add a lot. And I also wanted to call out how she mentioned about aluminum, things like that. It's really important to understand. I had done a presentation previously called Power Foods for the Brain. So if any of you are interested, shoot me an email and I'll send you that one that we did a while back. but it talked about the beta amyloid plaques in our brain that cause these synapses and problems inside our brains. And what they came to find was these plaques that obstructed the flow of information in your brain, which caused cognitive issues, Alzheimer's, dementia. There was a couple things found in it. There was saturated fat, there was cholesterol, and there was heavy metals. Metals like iron, metals like copper and zinc, and metals like aluminum. So keep in mind, we don't need to consume a single anything of aluminum. So when we're wrapping our food in aluminum, when you're eating some processed foods that have aluminum added to it, like frozen pizzas, things like that, they actually add it to it. So keep in mind, aluminum is not supposed to be inside of our body. So just want to call out those two things, and also mention the power foods of the brain if anybody does have any questions about that at the end. We can talk about that. Thanks, Isabella.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. So that was BRIGHT, the first word in the Bright Minds acronym. Oh, it's not clicking. Oh, here we go. M, which is for mind storms. This is talking about neurotransmitters, electrical activity in your brain. So your brain has lots of neurotransmitters that help you think, feel, and act, and different diseases can impair the brain in different ways, such as causing damage to neurons that slow the speed of action potentials, causing there to be fewer synapses in a network, excessive electrical activity. This is seen in seizure disorders. Some of the risk factors: history of seizures, frequent complaints that things look or smell or taste funny, sudden repeated fear or anger, periods of panic, visual or auditory changes, mild paranoia. Strategies for reducing mindstorm risk factors. Again, of course, caring about your brain, avoiding anything that may increase it, engaging in behaviors that decrease mindstorms. So this could be engaging in prayer and meditation, or doing yoga, taking anti-seizure medications if you need to, and getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night. That's a big one. I is for immunity and infections. So immunity is your body's way of defending against external invaders such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, and it patrols your body for internal threats such as cancer cells, things like that. It also regulates your level of tolerance to potential environmental triggers such as allergens, and it performs its functions in these 4 ways. So identifying external invaders, recruiting your white blood cells to attack, determining invaders and troublemakers in case they return. And there are more than 100 different autoimmune disorders, actually, including multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, and type 1 diabetes. Those are just a couple of the many autoimmune disorders that exist, but they are often associated with an increased risk for things like mood disorders, schizophrenia, ADD. And these immune disorders fall into 5 categories, all of which can impact your brain health and or mental health. Infectious diseases, so the other part of the I, these are another underestimated major cause of mental health issues. So things like Lyme's disease, strep throat, these can actually impact your brain health and therefore your mental health. So not just your physical health, like many would think. And these are some of the risk factors. Of course, obviously, autoimmune disorders, unidentified infections, and some strategies for reducing your immunity and infections risk factors, knowing your personal history and checking the health of your immune system, avoiding infections as much as possible, engaging in immune-enhancing habits, so like things like boosting your vitamin D, lowering stress, getting enough sleep, eating well, eating plants, and again, if needed, taking nutraceuticals that boost your immunity and can prevent infections from attacking. N is for neurohormone issues. So Hormones control and regulate the activity of your cells and your organs, and they play an important role in brain health and therefore mental health as well. A lot of people have deficiencies in different neurohormones. There are a lot of factors that could contribute to neurohormone deficiency, such as excess stress, obesity, excessive exercise, eating too much sugar, too many processed foods, vitamin deficiencies, alcohol consumption. Oops, sorry. But there are some strategies, of course, for reducing your risk, caring about your hormones and testing them on a regular basis, steering clear of endocrine disruptors such as toxins, some personal care products and flame retardants as well, possibly taking nutraceuticals if needed. And D for diabetes. This is a big one because it's a very prevalent risk in America, as many individuals have either prediabetes or diabetes, and many are overweight or obese too. Diabetes is having high blood sugar and or being overweight or obese, and it's an epidemic affecting nearly half of the US population. So your weight and brain health kind of have an inverse relationship. So as your weight goes up, the function of your brain goes down. And some of these risk factors are high fasting blood sugar levels, prediabetes or diabetes, being overweight or obese, alcohol abuse, being sedentary, family history plays a part as well. Some strategies for reducing your diabetes risk factors: engaging in regular healthy habits, such as eating healthy. Again, I know a lot of this is repetitive, but a lot of these are just good lifestyle habits to have. But exercising enough, sleeping enough, eating well, eating mostly plants, things like that will definitely reduce your risk for diabetes or obesity, or both. And lastly, the last letter in this acronym is sleep. So getting enough sleep is important for your brain so that your brain can perform important functions such as eliminating cellular debris and consolidating memories. And there's a lot of research that connects poor sleep health with poor brain health, as you can see here. In case you're wondering about these statistics, about 75% of people with depression also have insomnia. More than 50% of people with anxiety have trouble sleeping. More than 50% of people with ADD or ADHD are more likely to experience sleep disorders than those without the condition. Some strategies for reducing your sleep factors: beware of bad sleep habits and engaging in regular brain healthy sleep habits. We have an entire presentation about sleep health that we did over the summer. If anybody is curious about learning more about sleep health, that one goes more in depth than this. And there are lots of good sleep habit or ways, techniques to improve sleep, and just lots of facts about sleep health and how it's so important. So
yeah, Isabella, to add to that too, in all those core areas of our Lifestyle Medicine Alliance, we do have a lot of information on a lot of those lifestyle areas. So there's all kinds of content and detail on there, and we're going to be adding all of our presentations. But two things to add on sleep: we all love it, and we need to get more of it. And what's really great is I always remind people, if you want to have a good tomorrow, the best thing to do is to get a good night's sleep tonight. So immediately following Isabella's presentation, you all have to go to bed immediately. No, I'm kidding. But so we have to understand that it's so beneficial. But what we have to understand here is that you need to consider this. If our goal is 7 to 9 hours a night, when you are getting 7 hours, let's just say you're 100% quality the next day. For every hour you take off, you're essentially losing potentially 20% of your quality. So if you have 6 hours, just consider you might be at 80% quality. If you have 5 hours, you might be at 60%. 4 hours, you might be at 40%. So see the decline? It's a good visual that I hope you guys understand, that when you're not getting sufficient sleep, your mind is being challenged so much more. Not only are you tired, you're more lethargic, but everything you're trying to do that next day becomes challenging. So just to really kind of put the stamp on that sleep, it's something that, you know, myself included, we all need to make sure that we think of it as essential. It's so essential that we should be sleeping a third of our life. Everybody on this meeting, we're all going to live to 100, right? So imagine that's 33, 34 years of our life asleep. So now that goes to show you that you need that sleep time to restore, repair, and energize your body for the days ahead. Thanks, Isabella.
Yes, thanks. Yes, sleep is very important. And if you want to read more about it, feel free to check out our presentation about sleep that we did over the summer. So that sleep was the last letter of the acronym. So we just went through all 11 of these bright minds factors that Dr. Aymond has found to have a huge impact on brain health or mental health. So here they are again. Each of the letters stands for one of his factors. I, again, don't know how it worked out so perfectly that it made the acronym Bright Minds, but kind of he includes these descriptions in his book for each of the factors. And I won't read through them all, but they are here if you want to go back and take a look at them. It's kind of like a summary version, I guess.
Isabella, this might be a good time to pause and check with everybody and see if anybody has any questions as we're seeing this visual here.
Yeah, well, I'm almost done, but yeah, sure. Oh, sorry.
Does anybody have any questions as she's going to be wrapping up shortly, but as we're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's the second to last slide, actually.
If you have any questions, just take yourself off mute and just, since it's up and the visual is there, just wanted to pause for a minute.
Yeah, I have a question, Isabella and Steve. You mentioned nutraceuticals, and I've not heard that term before. Can you explain a little bit more about that? And is that something like, I just assume it's like a supplement. Yeah, I was going to say a pill of some sort, but can you explain more about that?
Yeah, Isabella, do you want to start speaking about that, and I can jump in too?
Yeah, you probably would know more about them than me, but I did learn what they were through reading the book. I had never heard of them either, but they are products used like medicine. I think that it can include vitamins and supplements. In the book, it lists a lot of nutraceuticals that recommended to be taken for each of these factors, but I didn't include in the presentation because I didn't want to encourage taking like extra medication, but things like vitamin pills, and also I think that it can include just any other natural product or like parts of a food, right?
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, it can contain, like, so for example, if somebody needs to take a little bit of added zinc, or if somebody needs a little bit of folate, or, you know, so think of it like vitamins and minerals, Ron, but it's just his reframing it that it's not a medication per se. It's not just, okay, you're going to take this pain pill or this blood thinner. It's more of a natural solution. So for example, if you think of like essential oils, they are a more natural approach that somebody could, instead of taking a medicine, they can use some peppermint oil to help their belly. Like, that's an example of something that is a little bit more neutral. It's not just eating the food. So I would say first and foremost, you want to get your vitamins, your minerals, your nutrients from your food sources. So you want to get them from whole unprocessed plant foods where you can, but you can supplement. And we had talked about this last week when we were reviewing the content. But when looking at it, so what you want to do is you want to kind of make sure your lifestyle measures are all good, and you want to see where you are. But for example, if somebody has a vitamin B deficiency or a vitamin D deficiency, there might be some natural ways that you can get it. But if you need more of a little boost, there's healthier ways of getting those nutrients other than just going on a straight medication. Does that make sense a little bit, Ron? So it's
absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I wasn't thinking along those lines. It's just, I thought of pharmaceuticals. Well, and then that's where I said, oh, kind of pills. And, you know, that's, you know, I know that we're not necessarily trying to go in that direction. So it made sense, nutraceuticals. I just hadn't heard that. So that's a great explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard of it before reading this book either. And I believe in the book, it also mentions some examples of nutraceuticals being therapeutic mushrooms and spices and things like that also count as nutraceuticals. Yeah,
Great question, man.
that is a good question.
Anybody else have any other questions about the acronym here or any of the content that Isabel's reviewed so far? And we can come back to it too. So if Isabel, if you want to go ahead and wrap up with a few remaining slides, we can come back.
Yeah, wrapping it up. This is the, oh shoot, sorry. Okay, here we go. This is the last slide, I believe. So this is just the last chapter that he includes in his book. And he's just mentioning how helping families help each other is an important part of the healing process for those with brain health issues and mental health issues. And if we truly want to end, quote, end mental illness, because that's the title of his book, we have to support everyone by encouraging communication and teaching everyone about brain health. So diffusing this information, spreading this knowledge that he has written about to other people so that they can understand, and just focusing on the person who is suffering, that invites frustration and failure. And so being cautious with tough love, showing people that asking for help is a sign of strength. Sorry. And teaching family members to be curious, not furious when someone has a setback. So sorry, that's not me, right? Okay. I'm so confused. Sorry. And that is all. I don't know why. I was paranoid that I was doing something funky there.
Go ahead and if you can go back to the bright minds for questions, that might be good. I think Jeannie was accidentally writing on the screen.
Gotcha. I thought it was me, and I was so nervous that I was doing something because I'm not really familiar with PowerPoint.
Jeannie, you're muted. I see you're trying to chat with us, but you're
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Don't worry. It's all good. I just thought it was me, so I was confused. But don't worry. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, you were showing off your technical skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Isabel, if you can go to the later slide that had the bright minds.
Oh, sorry. Right.
Sorry.
Here we go.
Okay, there you go.
Perfect.
So, guys, before we open up for questions and wrap up, I just kind of want to clarify some things here. Just some simple lifestyle approaches, because again, that's what we believe in with the Transform Lifestyle Medicine Alliance. First and foremost, is not. It's kind of challenging the traditional medical system, because if you think about our modern day system, you go to the doctor and the doctors evaluate your symptoms. Okay, so they evaluate your symptoms, they ask you about your symptoms, your challenges, your problems, and then it's simply what they do is they start to look and say, what are the solutions we have in our toolbox to help with this person's challenge? 95% of the time, they don't really ever want to address the cause of the problem. And this is something we've spoke about repeatedly, is that we want to take it a step further and say, well, what is the cause, okay? It's important that we go through and say, somebody is anxious. We don't want to just medicate that person and say, oh, well, you have some anxiety, take this pill. We want to consider that and say, now, when are you anxious? Why are you anxious? What is happening with you that may or may not cause that anxiety? And so essentially we want to get at the cause. So then we want to evaluate and understand that, because if you want to fix something, you got to know what the cause is first and foremost. Like me being a horrible husband over here, instead of saying, well, why am I not a good husband? And then over here, the doctor says, just buy your wife some flowers, right? Ladies, that's not going to help you. If you're a horrible husband, flowers isn't going to help. What we have to understand here is you have to figure, okay, well, maybe I need to be better at communicating, or maybe I need to be more selfless and more giving. Whatever it is, same thing goes with health. So what we encourage everybody to do is understand what are some causes of it, but we really want to go through and reinforce that lifestyle medicine and lifestyle behavior works. So that should always be your first line of defense. Couple things I want to call out here is just to reinforce. And first and foremost, Isabella, thank you very much for going through all the detail. I know that this was a challenging topic. Guys, just the kudos to her. It was a very big book. It's got a lot of information, a lot of detail, and it's hard to take a book and can make it concise to a presentation. But I want to give you a couple quick pointers, all right? So here's a quick summary. Blood flow, first and foremost, the best things we can do behaviorally are eat a lower fat diet. First and foremost, we need to eat a lower fat diet. We need to go through and eat as many plants as we can. So when we think about blood flow, the more plants and vitamins and minerals we get through our food, the more it dilates our arteries. So it increases blood flow. Because blood flow is the name of the game in so many things. It affects our brain, our heart, and every cell in our body. So we need to eat a lot more unprocessed plant foods. We need to avoid the fat. Aside from that, we also need to make sure we're exercising, because when we exercise, it dilates our arteries as well. So a couple quick things there. Retirement and aging, essentially, to sum it up, from my perspective, having heard Isabella go through this a few times, it really reinforced to me is that you have to stay active mentally. Think of it like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. We have to keep our brains active. Essentially, I remember I played for Tubby Raymond at the University of Delaware, and he always said, why am I going to retire? And he eventually retired at like 76, coached for many, many years. And he said, why am I going to retire? I'm not going to retire to die. He thought that if he stopped keeping himself actively and mentally engaged, he would slowly but surely lessen. So a key thing there is we got to keep our brain challenged. Read books, do crossword puzzles, engage in conversations that challenge you, play Jeopardy, right? Anything that keeps your mind going is important as we age. Inflammation, huge thing there. When it comes to inflammation, one of the biggest causes of inflammation is food and alcohol. So we need to consider the fact that most foods that we eat in the standard Western diet are very highly inflammatory. And so what we have to understand is that we need to eat foods that not only don't inflame us, but we need to eat the foods that are anti-inflammatory. The things that are anti-inflammatory are the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains and the legumes, the beans, peas, and lentils. Genetics. She said that quote amazingly is that your genes may be the loaded gun, but your lifestyle is the trigger. All right. A message to somebody out there that is predisposed for breast cancer. It wouldn't be to go and mutilate your body and have somebody, chop off your breasts and reconstruct your breasts out of fear. The message should be aware that you have a family history, but affect the lifestyle changes that are going to prevent breast cancer. So we have to treat genetics as a thing that we need to understand, but we need to not play victim to them either. A good call out here and a good example for mental health is Alzheimer's and dementia. If you go to the average mental health doctor or, a doc looking at the brain, if they find out that you have family history of Alzheimer's and genetics, the common message is, sorry to hear that. It's only a matter of time before you get it. I mean, that's the message out of the majority of these docs. And that's a horrible message. And that is not something that we want to give to anybody. I would not want to say, oh, Ron, okay, you have a family history of this. You're out of luck, Ron. Just keep checking yourself. Like, no, I wouldn't want to give Ron or anybody else that message. The message is be aware, but understand that you don't have to be a victim of your genetics. Your lifestyle plays a role. If you have a predisposition, I would challenge you to be even better and say, I have a family history of heart disease. I'm going to be even better to prevent this. Not just say, well, my life doesn't matter. I'm going to be sick someday anyway. Head trauma, coming from a former football player. I had some good stuff to say, but I can't really remember it. No, I'm just kidding. When we think about head trauma, we have to understand that this is a real thing. And we have to understand whether we're riding bikes, whether we're riding horses, or we're doing anything in our life. When we have that head injury, we have to understand that our brain is soft. Like Isabella said, it's very soft, and it's very sensitive to injury. So we have to understand every head injury, every head bump, every fall can absolutely have some detrimental challenges. Toxins. The great majority of toxins come from drugs, alcohol, medicines, and food. All right, so those are some areas that we really need to do our best to get off any medicines we can, address it naturally so we don't have the harmful effects of medicine. But then we need to avoid toxins that are added to our food. Unfortunately, more than 50% of the American diet is ultra processed, meaning it contains 5 5 to 10 or more chemicals within our food. So we have to understand that when you're buying this prepackaged dinner, it might be convenient that you can throw it in the oven and hit 45, bake it 350, but you have to understand it's not as natural as you're thinking, and it's got a lot of stuff in it. Mindstorms, this is something that we need to understand, that when we're looking at things that are going on in our mind, this could be, work stress, life stress, family issues, relationship difficulties. These things can be big triggers for mindstorms, and we're all going to have these challenges eventually. But an important thing that we can do here is we can recognize it early, and we can be aware of some of the causes of these challenges that we might have. Immunity and infections, this is really important. And to me, with COVID and everything we have now, this is the biggest public health missed opportunity over the last 7 months. We have not been addressing immunity like we should have. We're telling everybody, wash masks, stay away from everybody, or wash your hands, stay away from everybody, and wear masks. My message to you, and Isabella's message, is strengthen your immunity. If you look at COVID, for example, it's already affected 10% of the global population. All right, so you're talking 10% of 7+ billion people. You can't run from a virus. You can't run from the flu. You can't run from COVID. What you have to do is say, how can I strengthen my immunity? That way, if and when I do get it, I will either be asymptomatic or I will be able to be resilient enough to get over it. All right, we don't want to run and hide. That's not the message we want. Like our pastor at church said this past Sunday, be not afraid. Don't run, live out of faith, not out of fear. Have a healthy amount of respect for an infection, but you have to strengthen your immunity through your lifestyle. Hormone issues, this is one that is a little bit more complicated, but understanding that hormonal influences, whether we're insufficient with the hormones that we have or we're over consuming. A good example of this is women and hormonal health. For example, a lot of times when women consume a ton of dairy products, it's a very hormone-induced product. You're essentially eating and drinking product from a pregnant and lactating cow that is very high in hormones and growth factors. So essentially that can cause all kinds of challenges, from autoimmune conditions to arthritis to things like polycystic ovarian disorder, and all kinds of female challenges, as well as the increased risk of breast cancer. So keeping a check on hormone would be good there. Especially things like hormone replacement therapy. We want to be very conscious that when your body's saying, I don't need as many hormones, and then you go and you inject these hormones into your body by way of your doctor, you're going against the natural aspect of your body. It may help your shift and your adjustments, but you have to understand that it will increase your risk potentially of increased rates of breast cancer and other types of cancers. So we just have to be mindful of that. Really quickly, diabetes is the combination of high blood sugar, prediabetes, diabetes, as well as being overweight or obese. The key thing that we have to understand there, that the big problem is the fat on the body that we eat. And a good doctor that we all like is, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. All right. We should be eating a lot less fat in our diet. When we eat fat, it directly gets deposited as fat if it's any excess. If you ever overeat, you want to overeat carbohydrates because it takes more for your body to convert it to fat. So if, not to pick on Ron, but I'd rather Ron eat more pasta than eat chunks of cheese on it, right? I'd rather him fill up on the carbohydrates instead of the pure cheese, because the cheese is easily deposited as fat. And not only that, the fat gets in our blood cells, okay? And it gets in our muscle cells. And it's a huge risk factor for blood sugar and for diabetes. It's not the sugar we eat that causes diabetes. It's the fat that we eat that blocks the cell's ability to uptake the sugar. So keep in mind, if any of you are struggling with your blood sugar getting slowly but surely higher over the years, pull back the fat and you'll notice your glucose levels will go down because your body will be more efficient. And then lastly, sleep. As I mentioned earlier, and I know Isabella really called out here, sleep is essential. We have some great resources on sleep, but we have to value sleep more than we currently do. If we're underperforming and underachieving our sleep, our body is constantly working at a less quality than we deserve. So anyway, I just wanted to give you that kind of summary of what Isabella went through. But again, first and foremost, thank you to Isabella for doing the presentation tonight. And Isabella, if you want to stop sharing your screen, we can open it up and just have a discussion with everybody about where we are, any challenges that we have. So we'll open it up. First and foremost, kudos to Isabella. Can we get a round of applause for Isabella? Woo, woo. Yeah, she did a good job, and that was a tough one to handle. So anyway, what do you guys think? Any questions, any feedback, any things that you think might be a little too hard to address or change in your life, or anything at all? What do you guys think? Questions about anything? Does the Bright Minds approach make sense?
Yes.
I think you had talked to Ron about the plant-based diet before, and I think we might have to talk about that again.
Woo, woo. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
and there's, sorry.
absolutely. And, myself and Isabella as well.